Hello there and welcome. My name is Joe Baguley. I'm the Vice President and Chief Technology Officer for Europe, Middle East and Africa at VMware. And in this session, what I really wanted to do is share a little bit of insight into VMware Strategy. What we're going to do is cut a little bit down beneath the marketing, but not necessarily right down to individual products, but give you an idea of what we're doing and where we're going, why some of our products do what they do, why some of our product suites sit as they are, and a little bit more interest at the end. We'll talk a bit about some of the future areas of research that we're looking at the Office of the CTO here in VMware, so you can truly understand, where together we can go forward with your organization and help you embrace the digital age, I suppose is the best way to put it. So when I talk to a lot of customers at the moment, obviously the top topic is digital transformation, and it's a very hip buzzword. Everyone seems to use it to the point where it's almost overused now. But when we actually get down to the meat of it, what it really means is it's translating itself into several different strategic priorities for VMware's customers. First of all, we're looking at a couple of things, which is the sort of the data center side of things, the infrastructure side, where people are looking to modernize their data centers and integrate public clouds. And we'll talk a lot about that today. At the same time, there's a new world out there, and people are looking to transform networking and security from the older, possibly physical-focused paradigms of latter years into the way that we now have to secure our applications and data going forward. And that leads nicely into people developing and providing their users or their customers with a secure digital workspace. And what we find here is the focus on giving users access to the applications and data they need anywhere on any device. And so these four strategic priorities come together and translate themselves down into a specific set of IT initiatives that we find at our customers. And you'll probably identify more with some of these if you're an IT practitioner, as some of the project titles are similar to derivative project titles that you might be involved with in your organization. So you'll see here we've got the evolving to private cloud. That one's going on for a long time, but it's literally taking the old physical world of the data center and truly making it into something that is a private cloud. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Then extending to hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud and integrating public and private clouds has been the on-trend way to deliver applications and data to your users for the last sort of 5 or 6 years, and it's certainly becoming the key way for a strategy for most of our customers going forward. The ability to choose where and when you deliver applications, where and when you deliver infrastructure, and the flexibility of having both on-premises and off-premises available is very important to our customers. Automation, as we start to get more complex, as we start to deploy more servers, more components, and applications start to spread out and stratify, automation becomes absolutely imperative. And so a focus on automation in our customers is becoming key. And then obviously next-gen applications, not your traditional 3-tier WebSphere, WebLogic kind of stuff, but much more into those cloud-native applications, those microservices you might have heard of, terms like containers and serverless, and the ability to integrate those with your existing infrastructure and applications whilst also supporting the development of new ways of doing things with those technologies. In transforming networking security here, we're looking at several different things, not only through using, obviously, NSX, our virtualized networking solution, but much more besides in terms of securing application infrastructure and having security map all the way up into the application and down into the infrastructure and working together in hand. Embracing cloud networking, as you start to build infrastructures that spread across both on-premises and off-premises, having a networking security stance that understands and works across both seamlessly without any real interaction is absolutely key. And then obviously unifying the branch and the edge. We'll talk a lot more about, a bit later about edge computing and what we're doing there and some of the plans we have. But now, as we sort of go through this world of moving towards the cloud, people are realizing we have to move further out to the edge. So networking is much more important. So there you've got the rise of technologies such as SD-WAN. And then in securing the digital workspace, as I mentioned before, it's about delivering applications and data securely to users on any device anywhere. But that boils down into several different initiatives, and it's not just let's do VDI or let's do mobile device management. It tends to be much more around things like securing access management, unifying endpoint management, so providing a solution that allows a user to engage with multiple different device types, be they iOS, Android, Chromebook, Windows, whatever, and have a common seamless experience and application access. And then obviously simplifying Windows delivery. There's been a lot of work over the years since the early 90s in automating and deploying Windows. I think we're finally there with Windows 10, and what we're doing with the integration with Windows 10 management in AirWatch and some of our products in Horizon Workspace or Workspace ONE makes a really big difference here. And so when we actually have a look, what those mean to our customers and what the actual business outcomes, I suppose, are, or the IT solutions and those initiatives translate into, it's things like unifying compute, network, and storage, which I'll talk about next, extending that management across any cloud, automating, delivering developer-ready infrastructure, and securing across all of that and unifying the edge of the network, whilst enabling such things as bringing your own anything, managing all devices from the cloud, and delivering Windows apps and desktops as a service. But if we sort of take those and translate them into a bit more of an architecture, it tends to look a little bit more like this. This is all about VMware's being able to enable you to deliver any application to any device and any user from any cloud. And so as we look across this from the bottom, what we're saying here is we're extending a continuum from your data center through public clouds such as AWS, IBM Cloud, OVH, and our large number of over 4,500 VMware Cloud provider partners, through to other public cloud IaaS such as Azure, IBM Cloud, Google Cloud Platform, etc. Across that, allowing you then to operate with spinning up both virtual machines and containers, and future workload types as well, which we'll talk about shortly, to deliver cloud services. And cloud management is very important there. Our vRealize product range that sits across all of those, both public and private cloud, providing you a true hybrid cloud management platform, is key to our customers moving forward. And that provides you with this continuous visibility, distributed operations, automation, security, governance, etc., across all of these technologies and platforms that you see below, be they on-premises or off-premises. And then all of that is sitting there to support both not just new, sexy, amazing cloud-native apps, but also your existing apps, because they're not going away anytime fast, our customers tell me. I was with a customer yesterday who were telling me that they're all in developing cloud-native on public clouds, but they've still got 10,000 private workloads on virtualized servers they have to deal with, and they don't see those moving anywhere, certainly not in the next 5 or 6 years, so they still have to deal with those. So this continual strategy for us is to provide our customers with ways of embracing future technologies, understanding that when that new way of working comes around, they can embrace it instantly, adapt, and expand into that space, whilst also keeping the lights on and making sure that all those investments you've made so far in terms of existing applications and infrastructure are maximized. And so when we put this together into one simple story, we can overlay on top of this picture an even simpler picture. And that is that we give you consistent operations. All of that I just talked about is about giving people consistent operations, management and ops across clouds, whether it's on-premises, off-premises, whether it's in your data center, whether it's in VMware Cloud and AWS, whether it's in IBM Cloud, OVH, you name it. That consistent operations across clouds is key. And that consistent operations is enabled because we provide consistent infrastructure. Across all of those I've listed, we're giving you consistent compute, networking, storage, and security, and the support for VMs, containers, or functions as a service as well across all of those. Together, this provides what most of our customers are looking for as they step into the future with us and go through their digital transformation journey, and that is a consistent developer experience. Whether someone is playing with existing applications or playing with open source IaaS, PaaS, CAS, FaaS, we provide the tooling, the telemetry, on top of that consistent operation and consistent infrastructure to make it easy for our customers to take advantage of whichever technology is making their business the most agile today. And so globally consistent infrastructure and globally consistent operations is important. So we've talked a little bit and very quickly here about the base understanding of what we're doing from a strategy in this globally consistent infrastructure and operations. But what's the challenges that you, our customers, are facing and our partners are helping them with? Well, we had this very simple picture a few years ago, in fact, painted by NIST over 10 years ago, was that we had these 3 layers of cloud architecture, SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS, and there was trade-offs between those. Obviously, the higher up the stack you get, the faster they are to adopt, but equally they're more sticky. Stickiness is another word for lock-in, I suppose. So, it's very easy to go and use a SaaS application, but as soon as you start putting your data in there, it gets very, very tricky to unpick that and pull it out. But sometimes you trade that for speed, and that's fine, and that's exactly what people are doing all over the world with technologies such as Office 365 and Salesforce and the like. But equally, there's trade-offs to be made in other places around operational consistency. If you start to split everything into multiple different SaaS providers, the ability to manage that operationally becomes quite complex. And so there's a trade-off. And for every type of thing that you do in your organization going forward, one of these is not going to be the answer. And that's the key point here. It's not that PaaS, Platform as a Service, such as Cloud Foundry, is going to be the answer to every single application problem, nor IaaS, nor SaaS. What you're going to have to do is understand that going forward, you're going to have a strategy that embraces and helps you manage and deploy across all of these. Now, this was the picture 10 years ago. Recently, this has got slightly more complex. I've simplified it here, but we've added a couple more in as an industry. We now have containers as a service, which sit above VMs but below platform as a service. And above platform as a service, we now have functions as a service, or serverless as it's called in some circles, where you just turn up and use a particular function for a very short period of time and pay for the use of that function instead of standing up maybe an entire platform or a container. So one of the great examples of this is, for example, one of our customers runs a large factory, and that factory they're doing IoT instrumentation in. So what they're doing is they're using functions as a service to go and make readings once an hour from various sensors across their infrastructure. Those readings are executed on FAS, but then written down to a SQL database, which sits on a VM, which is infrastructure as a service. Running alongside that, there's a extract, transform, load. There's essentially an assessment that goes on in containers that reads into that database and generates separate insights for the regards of management reporting. That management reporting is then brought up through a platform as a service in Cloud Foundry, which they then access as a management team through their mobile devices in a web browser to see current status on what's going on in the factory and where everything is. So whereas before you previously probably would have stood up a quick three-tier architecture, a database, an app server, and a web server and got that all running, the more efficient way of doing it nowadays is to use the best piece of technology or the best architecture for each of the pieces you need to do in that application, but it means that it becomes more complex. And it's becoming even more complex than that because now you have to choose between whether they're on-premises or off-premises for each of these. And so actually, as you go forward, you're not looking at simplifying things. Applications are stratifying into further and further smaller pieces through technologies such as functions as a service, containers, microservices, etc. And you now need to have a management strategy and a support strategy for all of these, for your developers and for your business going forward. And that's exactly what VMware is here to help provide. We're here to help provide that globally consistent infrastructure and globally consistent operations for both on-premises and off-premises, IaaS, CaaS, PaaS, and FaaS, whether it's infrastructure as a service, containers as a service, platform as a service, functions as a service. We're here to make sure that through our management and automation tools and our infrastructure platforms and networking security offerings, we give you that kind of offering. So let me tell you a little bit more about how we do that. I'm going to use some slides I've used for many years, and some of you have heard me speak before will recognize the next few slides, but there's some new bits been added on as more of the story is developed. But it gives you a better understanding of what we're trying to build here and how this makes sense. So hopefully most people understand the concept of a RAID controller, which is where you have a collection of disks that are made to look like one big disk or storage array through some technology, either hardware and now more increasingly software-based, such as a RAID controller, that the applications talk to. They don't talk direct to disks, they talk to a RAID controller that provides them with storage, and then the RAID controller worries about where and how and when it stores those individual files and bits and bytes. Well, to understand what we're doing here in our data centers and across clouds, all we have to do is swap the pictures of disks for pictures of data centers. They're not particularly great pictures. These are slides I've done myself. But also then swap where it says RAID controller for software-defined data center, or the operating system of data centers, as I call it, and we call it quite often inside the office of the CTO here. And once you understand that what we're doing is providing a layer of software that goes across all the hardware and all your data centers and unifies compute, networking, and storage across all of those to provide a common platform, a common operating environment, and a common infrastructure for all application types to sit on top of, it starts to make sense. So whereas individually, if you looked at something like network virtualization, you might think, well, that doesn't make sense out of context. Maybe VMware's just trying to virtualize everything they see. But when you see network virtualization as a key component of virtualizing an entire data center and enabling true application portability, and more importantly, that security policy follows those wherever they go, it starts to make sense. Let me explain that in a little bit more detail for you. we have a technology called vMotion. vMotion allows us to move a virtual machine live whilst it's running from one data center to another. That's not a problem. We can do that. The challenge actually comes is when that's allied with a physical networking approach where I can easily move a virtual machine from one data center to another, but if I've got old-style physical networking thinking, I'd have to change its IP address, remap a whole bunch of stuff, configure some firewalls, maybe sort out some load balancers, etc. Whereas if I virtualize the entirety of the networking, which is what we do with NSX, then everything that's associated with that virtual machine is entirely abstracted from the physical layer. So what that means is as I move that virtual machine around, its IP address stays the same because it's not tied to physical anymore, but also all of its security stays the same. So no matter where it exists in its infrastructure, its security follows it. Its policies follow it. The management follows it. The operations are simple and don't care whether it's on-premises or in one data center to another. And that on-premises and off-premises will become a little bit more relevant as we get later on. It's the same with storage. Our virtual SAN, vSAN solution, actually allows you to build a distributed SAN across all of the nodes within your data center. What it does is it aggregates the attached storage to the compute nodes into one distributed file system, is a simple way of looking at it. But it can span multiple data centers. So again, as I'm live moving these workloads around within this operating system between data centers, the storage is not something I have to be concerned about. More importantly, storage policy, again, is tied to a virtual machine, not to a particular store. So I don't have to say I need to pick this LUN which has this level of protection for this particular virtual machine. I just say this virtual machine must always have 2+1 in terms of storage, and that'll always happen no matter where it ends up. But of course, on top of here, we're talking about the workloads, and those workloads you'll see there are virtual machines. It's a virtual box with the operating system and the application inside it. But we at VMware have always called them containers. So when something like Docker came along and introduced the concept of containers where you're virtualizing an operating system, or even the next step after that, functions as a service such as OpenFaaS, what we're focused on is making sure that those are first-class citizens on top of this operating system. So if you do want to play with containers and use containers in production, we have several different solutions for you. The first of those is something called VIC, which is vSphere Integrated Containers. That allows you to directly provide a Docker API on top of our operating system for data centers, which from now on I'm going to call VMware Cloud Foundation. And that Cloud Foundation allows you to look up and put VIC on top of it and provide this northbound Docker API, so your developers think they're talking to a Docker machine and spinning up containers, but on the back end we're spinning up containers for them, spinning up the appropriate virtual machines and putting all the management in place. However, as we all know, the trendy thing to do now is Kubernetes, and of course we have a solution for that. We have a solution there in PKS, which is the Pivotal Container Service. And PKS provides you with that ability to deploy a fully operational supported version of Kubernetes directly on top of a VMware VM environment, wherever that may sit, and provides you with the ability, again, for people to turn up and talk to native Kubernetes. It's, in fact, lockstep Kubernetes developed and co-launched with Google. And on top of that, that sits underneath that, there sits some very intelligent stuff called BOSH, which is actually the very clever piece of software that also works with Cloud Foundry to decide to make sure we've got the right number of containers spun up for the right number of virtual machines at the right time. So again, whether you're turning it with a VM or whether you're turning it with a container, they are first-class citizens on this operating system. And more importantly, all of that stuff I talked about before, the compute, networking, and storage features are exposed equally to containers as they were to VMs. So some of the key challenges around containers are around separation, around security, networking, etc. We have those solved because of how we've built our operating system. And the next step from that is OpenFaaS, which is that other logo you see there, which is the Functions as a Service open source initiative. And we're looking there at how we further support that, in addition to other things such as AWS Greengrass is supported on vSphere, and we have our own open source project there in Dispatch, which we're pushing to help people understand how to run functions as a server and serverless on top of a VMware environment. Now, of course, this operating system for data centers truly gets powerful when we start to span it across both public cloud and private cloud. So now it's become VMware MultiCloud, or an operating system for clouds. And so now in this hybrid cloud environment, I'm providing you with one globally consistent infrastructure, one globally consistent operations model that supports you running both on-premises and in the public cloud, and on top of that supports you running both virtual machines and containers and functions as a service as we go forward. And there's some important things to point out here. Those clouds on the left there are huge in number. in addition to the 4,500 VMware Cloud provider partners that we have that use our operating system for clouds, VMware Cloud Foundation, to do that, we also have partnerships specifically with people like IBM Cloud and VMware Cloud on AWS. And so some of the largest clouds in the world are running VMware to run their public cloud. And I want to talk a little bit more about VMware Cloud on AWS as well. Why people are looking at using the public cloud alongside the private cloud and entering into a hybrid cloud world, we tend to see hits in three main areas to start with. The first one, people look at it as simple data center extension and disaster recovery. And the great benefit of what we're doing with this model is that if you go and use a public cloud in this model, it literally looks like an extension of your existing data center. It just appears as another data center in the same management tool sets that we're providing to our customers today. And people are using that for simple footprint expansion or test and development. DR seems to be quite a popular one. Quite a lot of people now, instead of having entire separate DR facilities, are using the cloud as a DR center. Interestingly and quite funnily, anecdotally, I've got a couple of customers who've gone and used a public cloud as DR and then realized that their applications run faster in their DR facility than do on premises and have actually flipped. So you may surprise yourself at what can be done with the public cloud here. Equally, people are looking for cloud migration, whether it's application-specific migration, data center-wide migration, shutting down their data centers, infrastructure refreshes, whatever it is. It's an easy destination now that we've made it with technologies such as HCX for you to be able to plug your data center into a public cloud and very, very easily migrate workloads, even converting what version they're on. So if you've got stuff running on, for example, vSphere 5.5, we can migrate that to running on 6.5 in a public cloud very, very simply. And then lastly, people looking at it for next-gen applications, whether they're looking to move the infrastructure and build the infrastructure to support next-gen applications or moving and refactoring applications to the public cloud. There's an awful lot of use cases that people are looking at here that hybrid cloud makes a lot of sense. But the reason people do it with VMware is because, as I said, of this globally consistent operations and globally consistent infrastructure. It makes a real difference. Now, I've mentioned VMware Cloud on AWS a lot so far. Some of you may not know exactly what that is. But VMware Cloud on AWS is where we are standing up this entire stack. So our vSphere platform, NSX, vSAN, and our management toolset on top of that, and providing that as a service to customers on Amazon hardware in Amazon data centers. We currently have that launched in both East and West Coast in North America. We recently launched that in London, and we'll be shortly launching it in Frankfurt in Europe as well. And so you can go and use VMware native tools and extend natively a VMware infrastructure into Amazon's cloud running VMware VMs, but in an Amazon data center. And that then gives you the ability to further access Amazon services and integrate with those. And you buy that as a service from VMware. Now, the great thing here is this is a roadmap presentation, and I'm talking a lot about strategy. What we're doing with the VMware Cloud and AWS roadmap is it is public. If you go to cloud.vmware.com, you'll be able to see the roadmap there. The URL's on screen here. I'll give you a couple of seconds to have a look at that. But what that is our live and fully updated roadmap to give you an idea of what we're going to bring out next on that platform. And it goes quite far into the future. And if you fire up that web page, you'll be taken here, and you'll see, this was just yesterday, there's 152 items on this roadmap of stuff that's either already available in preview or we're developing or planned. And that could include even opening new locations. And there's a whole host of new and exciting stuff that we're doing across the platform there to make this literally a seamless extension of your data center and one of the best places to run workloads going forward. So I'd actively encourage you to have a look at VMware Cloud on AWS as being the next place that you place your next virtual machine that you spin up, and go and give it a try, because it's actually very, very easy to do. And so we've talked so far about this operating system for data centers called VMware Cloud Foundation. This is where we're getting compute, storage, and networking, vSphere, vSAN, and NSX together into one combined package, I suppose, to allow you to have that globally consistent infrastructure. We're then running that in multiple different public clouds, and we're running it both on premises for you and in those public clouds. But there's a whole new place that's exciting for us too, and it's exciting for our customers in the marketplace. And that's the edge, which I've designated here by high-quality graphic of a shop. And what we're doing here is we're saying, okay, fine, well, actually we're finding our customers want to run virtual machines and containers and FAS, actually, functions as a service, closer and closer and closer to the point of need. And there's various reasons why people do that. if you go into a standard retail store, and any big retail store near you, and have a look behind the scenes into what runs that store, you'll find probably a rack or just some computers piled up underneath the manager's desk. There'll be some networking equipment, there'll be some point-of-sale support equipment, various different bits and pieces there. And what we're looking at is, okay, how do we simplify that? How do we get that down to 2 or 3 solid-state servers that run this operating system, that provide resilience, that allow you to have the same operating model both in the branch that you have in the core, and make the whole piece very easy? Because right now, if you work at an organization that has a large distributed infrastructure, if you're trying to develop a new next-scale application, and you turn around to your branch management team and say, I'd like to spin up 3 containers in every branch, in most cases, the branch management team will look at you and go, what's a container? We, in this environment, are saying, okay, well, how do we help you spin up at the very edge compute resources that are entirely compatible, in fact, exactly the same as that you're running in the public cloud and in your data centers, or the core, as we call it. So again, this multi-cloud operating system extends from something as small as almost an Intel NUC server at the edge through your data center through to the public cloud, and allows you to spin up things such as containers and FAS and VMs all the way to the edge there. So again, more reasons why we're seeing edge compute. Well, one of them is to do with response time. Some things just aren't going to happen in the cloud. If I'm, running video analysis at the edge, I'm not going to send pictures of every single cat up to the cloud. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do analysis and compute on that right where I'm collecting those images, and maybe just send up selected results. Equally, if I'm running augmented reality, I can't afford the network delay of having to send information all the way to the cloud and back again across a network as I move my head around to overlay information onto the goggles that I'm wearing. And equally, if I'm configuring or running some automated robot, I don't want to have to wait 300 milliseconds to tell the robot to stop moving the arm in case it hits someone. Or if I'm driving my automated car and a car pulls out in front of me, I don't want to have to wait 6 seconds for the cloud to respond to tell me my car that it needs to brake, that a car's pulled out in front of me. So we're seeing more and more environments where people are asked to put more comprehensive compute at the edge, but make that compute as simple to manage and as easy to deploy as possible. And so that's a key focus for us here at VMware, and something that we're looking at right now. And you can expect some great stories about that in the future. But stuff that we're doing today in that space includes the recent acquisition of VeloCloud. And VeloCloud adds to our network security and management portfolio, providing a full SD-WAN solution. So instead of providing and building out specific MPLS equipment in every single branch, you can push out something that actually will run as a virtual machine, but in the moment runs as managed hardware that's very, very simple and cloud configurable to allow you to do full SD-WAN over any type of connection, or even aggregate connections very simply. When you start to combine that with virtualized hardware, you start to get to a really compelling edge solution. So as we start to see applications move, and if you think back to that picture I drew earlier of SaaS, FAS, PaaS, CAS, IaaS, etc., what we're seeing here is we're seeing a spread across the cloud, both vertically and horizontally, and across infrastructure vertically or horizontally, as applications move to take advantage of being in the right place at the right time. So applications are coming out of the data center. They're coming out of being stuck in one database and one app server, or maybe a sharded database, and starting to be spread to where they needed to be. Maybe the storage is in the cloud. Maybe the computer's in the cloud. Maybe some of the deep learning that needs to be done is in the cloud. But maybe some of the real-time stuff is happening at the edge. Edge gateways connecting information and doing thinking as well. So you'll start to see, as we stratify applications into smaller and smaller bits, those bits will spread out across the network as well. And so having one consistent operating model and one consistent infrastructure to support that is very, very vitally important to set down as a foundation today for your users and for your business as you go forward. So come back to where I started in a way. It's very important to understand that going forward, you're going to have a strategy around how you provide infrastructure, containers, platforms, and functions as a service to your developers and your users and your business and your other IT users going forward. And having a strategy of doing that both on-premises and off-premises is important, and that's exactly what VMware is providing, the ability for you to say yes to any one of those boxes wherever they are, and understand that you're going to be doing the best you can at any moment to provide those. So at this point, I want to jump a little bit more just as we come towards the last couple of sections of this presentation to highlight some of the things we're looking at from a future perspective to give you an idea. And equally, I'd love to have a chat with you, and some of my colleagues would love to have a chat with you if you're looking at these areas too, because we're looking at what we do in these spaces to help support them. So some of the areas we're looking at as a company, and these are, it's a bit of a buzzword bingo slide here, and I've talked about some of these like Edge and Internet of Things to an extent in a limited way already in the time that I've got. But also we're looking across how we use machine learning and artificial intelligence. Not only how do we support machine learning and artificial intelligence as an application type that sits on top of what we're building here, but more about how we use that. We use machine learning already in a lot of our products for assessment and management of reporting of logs, for example, and some of our automation tool sets. But we're looking much more about how we can do intelligent automated workload placement. So already some of these things I talked about will decide, the system will decide the best place to run an application or the best place to run a VM or a container for you rather than some architect having to do it at the same time. More importantly, we can start to drill in and understand how as we grow and start to have to manage thousands of complex components, they can start to manage themselves. When we look at something like hardware acceleration, we're increasing our investment here in support for both GPUs, GPGPUs, and FPGA here in terms of supporting customers that are using those both for HPC, but also as part of what they're doing for compute. We're seeing an increasing number of GPU clouds. So this isn't just about how we support VDI support for GPUs out on desktops. This is much more about how we take advantage of that. Obviously, quantum computing, I mean, no CTO slide is complete without quantum computing on at the moment. I'm not saying we're looking at virtualized quantum computing, but what we are looking at here is one of the interesting spaces is around encryption. If quantum computing becomes a reality in a reasonable time frame, and reasonable being in the next 5 to 10 years, it has the potential to essentially negate most of the encryption that we use today, because the encryption we use today is built on the premise that the amount of compute required to crack it is too high. Quantum computing could leap past that very quickly. So actually we're looking for ourselves and for our customers at things like quantum-proof encryption and other things. Adaptive security. We've already launched a product in adaptive security there, and a product called App Defense. What App Defense will do is it will sit there in the hypervisor level and spot when machines and virtual machines and things that are running on top of it are doing things out of the ordinary. So as opposed to the way that you or I would normally, we don't get up in the morning and scan ourselves for 40,000 known viruses. That's not what humans do. What you do is you get up in the morning and you think, actually, I don't feel normal. I don't feel right. I need to go get checked out. Well, adaptive security is about doing that for infrastructure, and that's exactly what we're doing with App Defense. So we will, through both our own intelligence of running millions and millions of VMs for our customers globally, but also based on your own learnings and adaptive intelligence within your infrastructure, enable you to know when a machine that you're running within your data center is doing something maybe it doesn't normally do. Maybe its processor's gone high because it's running some encrypting thing because it's encrypting all its own files for ransomware. Maybe it's talking to some port on the internet it's not talked to before. So we're looking at now how security is becoming much more adaptive and reactive than it is necessarily looking at just scanning on known vulnerabilities. And that extends out to the network too. And so what we're doing there is working on how we can look at network security more holistically across the entire application from edge through core to the cloud, and understand that in the context of the app and understand where things are talking, where they should and shouldn't be. I've talked a lot about serverless already. I said the support there we have for OpenFAS, the work we're doing with the Dispatch project, and the support we've got for AWS Greengrass. You'll see more and more from us on our serverless going forwards. Last one I'll highlight here is blockchain. We do have some work on blockchain. You can see that actually on our website. I'll point that out in a minute, and we will be providing support for blockchain going forward. What we mean there is we probably will be bringing out something that will help you do a blockchain and run blockchain on this infrastructure and look at blockchain as a workload that we support on top of this. If you're interested in more and looking more at the future of VMware, I'll highlight a small and little-known area of the Office of the CTO website here that a lot of people don't see, which is the VMware Research website. And the URL for that is research.vmware.com. And if you go and look at research.vmware.com, you can click at the top there on projects, and you'll be taken to see some of the cool research projects we're doing, some open source, and what we're doing in that space. Some of our researchers, our academics, looking at some of the cool next stuff that's happening. Some of these are already in products. So Corfu, you see there on the left, actually already has formed part of NSX. But there's other pieces there too, specifically around blockchain, as you'll see, Hillview, which is a huge spreadsheet, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're excited for more, want to know more about where VMware is going and what we're doing, I'd encourage you to look at the VMware Research website. So There's a lot to cover in sort of a little over 30 minutes here, and it's difficult to cover anything in particular detail, but I wanted to give everyone a little bit of a taste and an understanding of why we're doing things and what we're doing in particular spaces. What we're doing is we're making sure that we provide you with that consistent operations model across multiple clouds and automated management of operations with intelligence machine learning built in that sits on top of consistent infrastructure for both compute, networking, storage, and security, both on-premises and off-premises, all the way from multiple public clouds through your data centers all the way to your edge, and providing you with support all the way through those. Allowing you to develop a consistent developer experience for all of that and enabling you to build a solid platform for the future, and then deliver that to any device. And so really we are now the company that can provide you with that solid, consistent platform that allows you to deliver any application from any cloud to any user, anywhere on any device, be they in a car, be they in a helicopter, as some of our customers are, or even be they on a nuclear submarine. We're there to make sure that we provide that level of infrastructure and that level of support for you as customers. So with that, it's now time to move on to questions. I've got joining me now Rory Chowdhury, who's the Product Marketing Director, and we're going to sit together now and hopefully answer some of the questions that you've got based on what I talked about, or some you maybe came to the session with at the start. So let's have a look at what's come in during the chat as we've gone through. So, I mean, we've had a few questions that have come in as we've been going on, and some people have been putting in. So there is a Q&A window as part of this webcast. Please use that to submit them. We've got one already come in here that I'm going to pick out at the top here, which is from, actually, there was one that I did answer as what I was going through, or I was helped by people answered going through, with regards to Spectre and the meltdown patches and performance issues. There's links there in the response to both the current knowledge base article, which is 52245, but also there is a blog post on it as well, talking about exactly what we do and performance issues, etc., responding to that. The other one was talking about, someone's asked specifically about the automotive vertical, so I was just talking about cars now. Our strategy for the automotive vehicle depends on which bit of the automotive vertical you're talking about. If it's just supporting the use of applications of cloud in a hybrid context, of course it's no different to anything else. Specifically though, we are working with a large number of automotive companies and tier one automotive suppliers in terms of the IoT strategy, and you'll maybe have seen our IoT team do demos at a few different websites, 2 different events, and there was a recent strategy webinar done on this as well, with regards to the ability to use our IoT platform, which is a thing called Leota, which is the little Internet of Things agent. I encourage you to go and look that up. It's open source, in harmony with what we've got, which is called Pulse IoT, which is our IoT management platform, to enable things such as remote management and firmware updating of cars, and we're already demonstrating that and working with some people on that, as well as full fleet management. But also we're working with other companies to provide a full platform where they're looking, as one particular automotive company is looking at the car as being almost like an application platform going forward. So we're working with them as how we push and run even secure containers at the edge in the cars. So our strategy with the automotive vertical is quite comprehensive, and probably find it's worth contacting us separately to talk to our automotive team what we can do for you there. I do actually have someone in Europe now who's focused solely from a strategy and technology perspective on the automotive vertical. So hopefully I've answered that question.
I'd chip in on that,
yeah,
actually, because one of the other things that we're working on is the user experience with particular vehicles. So, for example, if I choose to drive, I don't know, a Nissan Leaf, and I happen to have my settings of how I like the seat, what temperature I like, etc. We're working with vendors so that they can then encapsulate that. It recognizes me, and then when I rent a car in another geography, if I'm visiting our headquarters in Palo Alto, I step in, fingerprint recognition, iris recognition, what have you, and the car automatically sets itself to my preferences. So that's the kind of extended vision, probably a few years away, that we're looking to drive. So it is comprehensive from the industrial platform through to the actual user experience.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff there, and I say we do have specifically a financial. We do have financial as well, a technology vertical space focused team. So I'm not saying technology, the automotive technology focused team within VMware dealing with exactly this, which is mainly spun out of the IoT side of things. So there's some other questions that have been coming in here as a side thing. There's Someone's put a breakdown of the cost for these services. Would be helpful if it was dumbed down for a CEO to understand. That's an interesting question to ask. It depends on what you're talking about here, so I think that's not really... How would you answer breakdown of cost for the services?
I guess it depends on which services we're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that is probably worth mentioning, and I apologize, I'm going to almost dive into product level detail, but we do have an entire set of functions, set of services that allow you to estimate cost of everything down to individual VMs through to applications. The product name is vRealize Business for Cloud. You have the ability to input the costs of your infrastructure to compare and contrast. So if you're trying to make a decision between whether you place your application on your own infrastructure or in any of a number of public clouds, it then gives you the ability to understand where you're going to get the best cost performance, and then you can balance that against your own requirements for agility and latency and everything else. So that's one piece. I think overall, trying to explain the higher level things, there's a lot of good material out there that will allow CEOs and other non-technical people to truly understand the cost profile of an IT infrastructure.
I think the point is here that when people are engaging with this, and this is a conversation obviously to have direct with an account team or a partner, is that what we're doing here is opening up choices such that you can use the most cost-effective solution for that part of the application that you want to do. And so you remember I talked about stratifying applications into FAS, PAS, CAS, IS, etc. The point being there is that you can choose to have the right part of the application, the right price at the right cost point. So, breaking down individual costs for individual services isn't necessarily relevant in this context. So obviously, costing for some of these is published, but is public anyway.
Yeah.
We could have some more questions coming in. I'm just looking through the list that's coming in now. Someone's saying a commitment to independence. You're saying you want to use HP servers. I think the whole point about our strategy here is that we truly are allowing you to have choice where you want to run that. So if you want to do your hyperconverged strategy on HP Synergy, we entirely support you doing that. And equally, whether you want to do it on Dell hardware, Fujitsu hardware, whatever, I think the whole point about what we're doing here is that independence from a particular hardware vendor. And we have people that are committed to one particular hardware vendor to support them across the board, and we have others that like to pick and choose and buy literally the cheapest hardware that week. The great thing about this strategy is you're not tying yourself to one particular hyper-converged strategy, shall we say, by going one particular vendor. The nice thing about our solution here is that it allows you to go across the board there.
And of course, the minute you go software-defined, then, vendor, you can be committed to a vendor, or you can go literally white label, and lift the functionality into software, which is really what we've been banging on about since October 2011, about software-defining the data center. So that's one piece. One of the other things that's come in, and there's a couple of questions on this, is skill sets and finding people to do all of this. And yes, there can be a challenge in certain markets and certain sectors, and there is the danger that the richer industries hoover up the people. There isn't an easy answer to this. Whenever something's new, there's going to be a skills shortage. But what is important to understand is there's a huge amount of learning resources available, and both from us, from traditional learning companies, IT technology learning companies. I won't name names, but you will probably have your own favorites. But also something that I know Joe is passionate about, I'm passionate about, is look at the diversity of your workforce. Look at who are you hiring? Are you purely hiring technologists? Are you looking at some, as our American colleagues love to call them, liberal arts graduates? Are you changing the way you're thinking about how you structure your approach going forward? So that is another piece, is look for the same kind of abilities and look for the skill sets to be inculcated into people who don't have a traditional technology background. That's one other option that comes into play. But equally, there's no substitute for taking people who've been doing this for some time, helping them educate, helping them train, helping them get onto the pathway for how they manage broader and bigger broader, bigger areas once we break down the silos.
Another good question here about what's the key difference between SDDC Manager and vRealize Automation. They're very different products, to be fair. So SDDC Manager actually is the technology we use for managing essentially our what's called VMware Cloud Foundation, which is the automation of deployment, management, and updates of both vSphere, NSX, and vSAN in the context of building a hyper-converged infrastructure, be it at an individual or even at a rack scale. So SDDC Manager is that piece of technology there that really pulls together VMware Cloud Foundation as that foundation piece, but goes up to and stops at vCenter. What happens is that with regards to vRealize Automation, that steps up to the next level. vRealize Automation sits on top of vCenter as just one of the providing pieces that it can automate on top of, whether that's automating the deployment and management of VMs, whether it's automating the deployment of an entire application blueprint that can span both on and off premises and multiple different sources, maybe even managing and deploying EC2 and Amazon Microsoft Azure instances. So they're different layers of the stack. So SDDC Manager is down there at the bottom of the stack, automating that globally consistent infrastructure and providing you with that platform such that you can then do the globally consistent operations I was talking about using something like vRealize Automation. They're very different areas. Yeah.
And complementary. So it's not an either or. They absolutely, build off each other.
Okay, cool. I don't think we've got any more questions coming in right now, not that I can see on my screen at the moment. What have you got coming on yours, Rory?
Well, I want to ask you about this. You digital twin. Yeah. You had it on the slide, and I know of it purely from a well, not purely, but ideally from a healthcare perspective. But it's something that I think, we sit on opposite sides of the AI fence. I'm kind of a little bit more conservative about it and concerned about it, which is unusual for me. I'm normally hugely optimistic about this stuff, and you go the other way. I'm the Elon Musk view, and you're the Mark Zuckerberg view. But I think from a medical perspective, being able to model the impact of a treatment, etc., is just incredible, and the potential applications are fantastic. But I'm interested if you see other applications and other areas where it might be useful.
Yeah, so medical is actually not the one that comes up as the first example usually.
Okay.
So my favorite way of explaining digital twin to people is to ask if they've ever seen the film Apollo 13. And in Apollo 13, at one point, they're up in space trying to solve the problem that things are broken, and down on the ground, there's Swigert there in an exact copy of the Apollo 13 module, trying to work out the power-up sequence that means they don't exceed the current requirement of the batteries, as you remember. And so that, in essence, was a twin, where he sat there on a twin trying to model possible scenarios. What we're talking about is if we now think about that as an aircraft engine hanging off the side of an aircraft, and that aircraft engine was CAD designed in the first place, so I've already got a full 3D representation of it. If I can then gather information about what's going on with that engine in real time or semi-real time, I can then model that in a computer, but also run thousands of potential future scenarios. Very similar to the medical point, and that can greatly influence my service scheduling and various other decision-making I might need to make around designing that, whether it's an aircraft engine, whether it's a wind turbine, whether it's whatever. For in a purely electromechanical context, it's a far easier way of doing advanced modeling. So, you take that CAD thing, you go out and build it in real life. Well, how can I then run thousands of different scenarios of it? So from that perspective, we're looking at how do we support that, and how do we support those kind of workloads when customers do that. But equally, you could almost look at digital twin as an example of running, if you want to look at it from an infrastructure perspective, a very purist perspective, it's almost like a DR thing. Can I take an exact copy of what I do in real life and do that in the cloud and see if I can run it differently, faster, better, whatever? And we're doing that with some customers in their applications today. And right down to the work that I did sort of 10, 15 years ago with the British Computer Society on modeling data center efficiency, and some of the early PUE work. That, again, was coming up with a model where I could model how a data center would run to see various different scenarios would be the best way to design it.
And I think, actually thinking about that, it also plays into something we've been banging on about for some time, which is moving data center capability and minimizing it, moving it to the edge, where it's being increasingly required by the volumes of data that we simply don't have currently, the latency, the bandwidth to transport to the center to process and move back. In other words, taking the compute to the data rather than the traditional approach.
And the work we're doing with Edge is changing that as well, because, as I say, one of the examples, I think I remember who was one of my colleagues used, was that, if I'm running video analysis at the Edge, I don't want to send every picture of every cat back to the center. I want to send back the interesting stuff. And so it really is that having that analysis done at the Edge, and then, when I want to dive in data, I can, I can go and pull that data in locally and centrally to do that. And also, it's all more about response times as well. So, how do I get those response times at the edge? So, yeah, so digital twin's an interesting one. It means lots of different things to lots of different people. So, it's an interesting question.
Right. There's a question from Ashley Bamber. I don't know the answer to that. I will find out, and we will get back to you. And I think we're in grave danger of having handled all the questions, so we can probably bring it to a graceful close.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think we're there. No, I think we've worked our way through all the questions. So with that, I'd like to thank all of you for coming along and listening to me today. There's been a very large number of people watching this webcast as we went through the strategy. I hope it's made some sense to some of you, simplified for others, and I hope it's not confused too many of you. Hopefully, I always manage to confuse Rory a little bit, so we'll know that and discuss.
Well, I start out confused, so we're okay.
So, Rory, thank you very much for coming and helping answer some of these questions.
Thank you.
And putting me on the spot as well. And I encourage you guys to engage with your local teams and whoever it is that you deal with at VMware, and equally chase me down on Twitter. I'm at Joe Baguley, and Rory's there as well as at Roras. So come and talk to us directly on Twitter, engage with us, and ask us some of these questions more personally, and maybe I'll see you at an event in the future, if not before. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Cheers all.